Do Clappy Clap number 2. Oh, look at LS. Just do it. Do it again. Do it. Give us another one. Give us 2. Oh, he was so good at it, though. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 9 of the POG State. How we've made it all 9 episodes, I have no idea. I'm Atlas. This is LS. LS, my friend, we have some pretty interesting guests on the show here today. It'll be Joe Marsh and it'll be Arnold from Gen.g.
One of them might be a little bit late.
And one might turn up a little bit late. No, you're exactly right. But first, I because I've got you just by yourself, LS, how's your week been? You know, have you been enjoying some more time off with a lack of competitive League of Legends and things like that? What have you been up to?
I've been streaming EDU documentary. I just watched the AlphaGo and AlphaStar documentaries on stream yesterday. But I've been a lot more lax this month. I've been doing a lot of pro content, like content with pro players and talk shows and stuff. So that's pretty much it.
Nice.
I'm ready for co-streams and LCK to get back.
Oh, heck yeah. And also ready for some more ways to listen and watch the POG State, LS. So let's go over that one, guys. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much. Make sure you give us a like, subscribe, write a comment, ride a bike. I don't know. Do whatever you can. You can also catch the podcast audio-wise on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher. We've got Buzzsprout, Google, TuneIn, iHeartRadio. If you are especially listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure you give us 5 stars and write a review. It could be a terrible review. It doesn't matter. You could write whatever you want. You could just say, I like apples. And that could be fun. Maybe Apple would like that as well because, you know, then they'd be being liked. But it doesn't matter what you write. Just write something. We want to be new and noteworthy. That this episode is going to be really, really interesting. So, LS, what do you reckon? Do you reckon we just get straight into it?
Yeah, let's just go right into it.
All right, let's go. Here are our special guests, guys. I'm going to start off with you, Joe. Joe, if you could just introduce yourself and let everyone know exactly who you are, if they don't already, if they've been living under a rock, something like that.
Well, if you haven't been living under a rock, or you have, I'm Joe Marsh. I'm the CEO of T1, 9-time LCK champions, and 3-time consecutive champions, and happy to be on the show.
Thank you so much for coming on. I know that you've got a busy schedule, winning all of those things all of the time. But if I could talk to now the COO of the most recent World Championship LCK team, Arnold Herr. How you doing, man? Can you introduce yourself?
Hey guys, my name is Arnold Herr. I'm the COO here at Gen.g. So you know, I spent my time between Korea and LA. Super excited to be here. And you know, we're really excited, and we are, like you said, the last Korean champion of League of Legends. So we got that going for us.
I needed to get something in there for you, Mr. 9 times champion over here. Was certainly
That's not fair, right? It's like the Lakers, and you know, you talk about the Lakers, but you talk about like Bill Russell comes in, you know.
Yep.
Yeah, you get one of those championship
So they
jackets.
can be the Celtics, and we're like the up and coming Lakers, you know. These are very boomer references. I know. We're talking about like the 80s basketball right now.
I mean, better put, we're teams that know how to do rebrands properly. So
hey, they've had more practice.
I don't know.
Though.
People still call you SKT.
I mean, you know, what are you gonna do? Old habits die. Yeah.
These things take time. So, gentlemen, I think there's I want to start off with some sort of more broad strokes topics. I know, Arnold, you've been in this scene for quite some time, but Joe, you've sort of been a recent introduction into the world of what was SKT, and since you came along, has now become T1 with the SKT and Comcast connection. Were you always interested in esports, or is this a new thing for you?
Yeah, so I got into esports back in 2017 when Comcast Spectacor, which is the sports arm of Comcast Corporate, bought the Philadelphia Fusion of the Overwatch League. Mm-hmm. And I was the chief business officer of that group. And even since then, like my first trip ever to Korea was March of 2018, always trying to find a path to Korea and to, you know, LCK. And yeah, I mean, esports, love it. I'm not a great gamer in terms of being competitive. I'm not a former pro, and contrary to what everyone would love to hear, but I'm a nerdy student, so it's not like that. But yeah, dude, I love esports. It's fun. It's competitive. It gets the juices going for us older folk who can't compete on the field anymore. So it's fun. But yeah, I've always had a passion for gaming and grew up gaming. So yeah.
As a fellow boomer, I completely understand. Arnold, how about you? I know you've been around Gen G for a little bit longer. What sort of brought you into esports?
Yeah, it's a funny story actually. I was always a gamer. Used to watch a bunch of stuff even back in kind of the StarCraft days, but really my interest started with League of Legends. I'm very similar to Joe. I suck at it, but I love it. I really started on the competitive gaming side. Actually, when I used to work at Google, and I was the only like mid to senior business guy playing in these internal tournaments at Google with all the engineers. And some of these engineers, man, they're ranked pretty high, as in Mountain View. So I got to be known as like this weird business guy. So the uncoolest business guy, there, and the engineer, the worst League of Legends player among the engineers. So that was kind of my brand at Google. But I ended up getting introduced when we were first starting up Gen G, picking up our first esports team in obviously a different title, and been along for the ride ever since. And it's been pretty fun, man. Like just learning about the scene, learning about the quirks of Korea versus America, and trying to manage kind of the East and West different cultures. It's been really exciting. It's been really fun, and it's been really cool to see how much has changed over the past few years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really interesting that you were sort of like the least cool on the engineering side of Google, but then probably the coolest on the business side, right? Because you're the one that's playing in these internal tournaments.
Oh yeah,
so
yeah. That's what that gets you cool points, right? Like
100%. I mean,
being on the bench of the right? Being on the bench of
everyone
the
that's on the internet
team.
love esports.
Exactly. People think you're so cool when you're on the bench of the intramural team. Like that's the goal.
Arnold's leaving out the fact that like the platinum level players in NA server at Google are probably like Iron 4 in Korea. So.
Yeah, that's what I live for as well, because I haven't been able to rank too highly here because the 15-year-olds that are playing in Korean solo queue are still just ridiculously good.
It's one thing to lose to them mechanically in lane. It's another when they just outsmart you, and you're just like, man, this guy's just running circles around me. He already knows what I'm doing.
I can't even use my boomer skills. It's absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. LS, are you put off by the fact that Arnold wasn't in the highest tier, and now are we losing Gen G points on the LCK broadcast?
No, I don't mind. I'm surprised. I didn't know he's played for so long.
Well, there we go. This is actually a conversation that we were having about coaches. LS and I in the last POG State episode was sort of about like how much League of Legends do you need to play. And I personally think that if you're COO or CEO of a company, you don't really need to be playing League of Legends. But it is super cool that you guys are still involved in the scene on such like a that sort of level, and that is super awesome to hear.
I think it's funny, like the people like, when I'm playing have no idea, like when they're trash talking me, they're like saying how bad I am, and I'm like, dude, I have advice from Faker and Teddy, and I still suck, and you don't know that. But like, I don't know what to tell. I want to be like, look, I suck, I know it, but like, you better stop talking trash.
LS, have you thought of offering Joe some coaching lessons?
I have not. I heard that you were getting coaching by the players.
Yeah, farm and don't die. Help. That was the phrase. And Teddy told me to stay back. Doesn't work. It doesn't work. They find the good players find the weak link every time.
Yeah. Look, sometimes it's all about where you've got your mouse positioned. That's what I've learned over my years with LS. It's all about where you have your mouse and how often you move it and how much you press tab. If you're doing those things a lot, I think you just win the game. Is that how it works, LS? Is that like coaching 101?
Killing the enemy's nexus is pretty good.
Earning that 50 gold.
Yeah.
In Overwatch, it's click heads in Valorant too. So the hard part is you gotta ramp up in other games too. Debatable.
Yeah, I think Overwatch is like play D.Va and then put your mouse to the sky and then press your alt button, isn't it? Isn't that how it works?
It's true. It's the hard part is like just keeping track of all these different games and like knowing enough to be present and understanding in conversations, but like it's actually very similar to the way that you would operate in a large organization or large company. Like the bad, executive is the one that's telling the person on the ground like you should do it this way. But the good one is like the one that's knowledgeable enough, but like, puts in the right people in the right places and all that stuff. That's my excuse for sucking at every game.
When I went into the coach's room and said, "Coach Kim, Nidalee, need it."
Is that why Faker recently released that Nidalee thumbnailed video? Is that all you, Joe? Is this your influence?
No, for any of the picks that no one likes, I'll take credit for like the Senna pick. That was me. Like Arnold and I have nothing to do with picking. So like when they're tweeting at me saying, "Why are you picking Senna?" I don't know. I wasn't in the booth.
I mean, dude, they tweeted us about that. They asked LS. They're like, "Hey, man, why is the LCK picking this?" And LS is like, "Well, it's not my fault, actually." I think everyone gets. If you have anything to do with it, you get blamed. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. But like a lot of the times, when we're doing like weird comps, like or things that like seem out of normal, we're working on something that we wanted to try out. Because again, the end goal is winning LCK is nice, but I think Arnold would agree the end goal was in October, winning Worlds.
Right.
So we got to prep things that we might need in the third week of October now to make sure that we're comfortable with it. Even if it looks bad, like right now in this current meta, we're trying things out. And a lot of the times when you see like the things that seem kind of oddball, a lot of the times it's like, hey, I want to try this one out this time and we'll go with it. Sometimes it works and sometimes it spectacularly does not, but you got to try it.
Arnold, do you have sort of similar strategies over there, or do you not get on the floor and chat to Edgar as much about what the picking strategy is?
Oh, Edgar, come on,
man. So in terms of like kind of your question around the strategy stuff, like I'm like I just try to understand what they're trying to accomplish, and I look for patterns, right? Like that's, to me, it's about pattern recognition. So it's really about like, okay, so we're trying these different comps, we're trying to do these things, like what's the goal, does it make sense, is that consistent, what do you expect to happen if you play this versus if you play that? To me, that's much more interesting rather than like, why did you play this? Because like there's a lot of stuff. This is actually one thing that I was gonna bring up, is that like there's a lot of stuff that I wish we could go deeper, and I feel like we need stronger data teams even on the casting side. Where we say like, well, let's go see like what their win rate is on that champ in solo queue, right? And like actually having those stats readily available. Then all of a sudden you'll see like, oh, why doesn't this team pick that character, right? Like because some players are not comfortable with certain picks, and if you don't have that pick in your pocket, then you don't, right? You can't pick it, and it's not part of your toolkit, right? So I do think there's a lot that goes on. Part of it is like some players don't want to play certain champions, or sometimes it's that the coaches want to try something different and want to start preparing. There's a lot more backstory to it that I wish we had more data and more time and more stories to tell. That's why I'm hoping that as we do more with the league, there's more coaching interviews, there's more player interviews, there's more stuff that goes on, because there's like a lot of cool stuff that goes behind the scenes, especially for the hardcore fans, that I think they'll like to see. Of course, at the same time, here in Korea, you can also get a huge backlash for saying something wrong, but that's kind of the fun of it, right? Like that is what sports is, right? So
like when you just said character instead of champion, they're gonna
be like, oh, this guy doesn't know, he's trying to play Overwatch out here. But yeah, I think like that kind of stuff is like, that's the cool stuff. And I look, there's a lot of cool stories, and like being behind the scenes, my goal is really to understand like what they're trying to do. And I always ask them like, what do you expect to happen if this happens? And are they right or wrong about the expectation, is me and what I try to understand, rather than like, being like, oh, why'd you do this? Because Reddit says you should do this,
Dude, you're so right. Because when Tolkien came on and Hygen for analyst for us, when I was in Korea and we were actually at Lowell Park, they gave me the data sheet of what we expected to like pick and ban. And it's like, okay. And as the bans were going on, I sat there and I was like, all right, explain it to me. It's like, if they pick this, and then we had a whole sheet and it was like following the script. And like, if you remember the first week, our draft was probably a little off, and we weren't following the script yet. And as you saw, as the season went on, it felt like, LS at halftime, you were like calling out like this is going to happen next, and like it would happen. It's because as the data started coming in, and like as you started getting more solo queue, and like we were working on things in practice and scrims, you know, that expansion of the data was really coming in handy. And you could see it happening like throughout the split. And it's invaluable. And especially like the data we have on other teams now, not just our teams in Korea, but, you know, LEC, LPL, that data is going to, you know, come in handy, you know, hopefully down the road.
That's actually super cool to know that you guys are keeping so much track. This actually goes back to exactly what Arnold was talking about like observing patterns and sort of having more of like a step back view of how it sort of goes rather than staying down onto the floor. Exactly what Arnold was talking about as far as like, you know, a bad, if you're trying to micromanage, then you're not doing your job. And I kind of want to bring us back away. We're going to go back into very deep League of Legends discussion. Don't you worry. This is the POG state. That's what we do. But I want to sort of understand what you guys actually do. Like, I want to know what a day-to-day is for a CEO and a COO of an esports company, because like, I don't really necessarily understand outside of League of Legends. I'm a commentator. That's what I know, and I want to know more. So, Arnold, I guess we could start with you. What is sort of like a typical day for the COO of Gen.g?
A lot of it is like, so I split my time between obviously the competitive side, which is kind of like, how do we make sure that we build teams for the long run that can win consistently, as well as the marketing and kind of the mainstream like business operations, right? So there's a lot of stuff that goes on. Like a lot of it would be, you know, meetings talking about, hey, you know, like right now we're scouting talent, not just for next off season, but the off season after that. And even academy players. Actually, one fact that people don't know is we've actually sent more pros in League of Legends, you know, some year over year than any other team out there, right? Like we've actually graduated more pros from our academy team. So we're super excited when the academy thing happens, right? So that stuff is always ongoing. We, you know, spend a lot of time obviously with sponsors, try to make sure that, look, they pay a lot of our bills, right? So we got to make sure that, you know, we activate them properly, that they're happy, that we figure out like what their goals are. So, you know, a lot of it is just a lot of meetings. A lot of it is putting fires out whenever stuff happens. And I think, you know, as an executive, it's really just dealing with more with people than anything else. So your day-to-day isn't about like a specific role. It's about like understanding how your teams are operating, not just the competitive teams, but also your business teams and trying to figure out like how you can be a good tiebreaker when you need to be, how you can kind of, you know, figure out and see problems before they happen, and just make sure that, you know, everything's running on time.
All right, so like a mediator more than anything else, controlling how the workflow
and it depends, right? Like I think every executive has a different style, right? Like if you're Steve Jobs, and you don't have to be a mediator, right? But, you know, unfortunately, I'm not Steve Jobs, right? So I just try to hire people smarter than me and get out of the way.
Do you have a similar mindset, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I think a lot of it, I mean, I'm based here on the East Coast. So when it's not, you know, COVID and travel restrictions, you know, I spend, you know, every month, you know, at least once a month, I'm in Korea. But a lot of it, like I keep odd hours, and you could probably see when I'm up, you know, I'm tweeting or doing something like that, but answering emails. But I keep like a little bit of Korean hours in the morning and at night. So I'll get up, you know, 3, 4 in the morning, answer some messages, you know, get another like hour of sleep, get back up, do some calls. And, you know, I've done 4 hours of work before it's 9 o'clock. And that's taken some time to get used to. My wife and kids, like it's a different schedule that I formerly kept when I was doing, you know, finance and analytics. Mm-hmm. And then also my nights now, like I have a lot of calls with Korea, you know, at my 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. Just because that's, you know, we're 13-hour time zone change. For me, a lot of it, obviously on the business side, you know, coming from a new joint venture with SKT and Comcast Spectacor, was getting the business side up and running, you know, so we can compete with the Gen Gs and, you know, G2s and Fanatics and everybody on the partnership side. So I think we've done a pretty good job of bringing partners in, and you know, that's one phase of the business. The other phase, like Arnold said, is the competitive side. And while no, I'm not picking players and I'm not telling people what to do, I am strategizing with my team to figure out what games are going into next. Obviously, you know, we're making a big splash in NA with Valorant. You know, we're also going to experiment with Valorant in Korea. So that's a big game for us. And then also some of our smaller games, which can be brand extensions, because not every game is a huge tentpole where you can go win worlds and get that national exposure. But it's good to have a variety of games. You have a variety of content creators, a variety of streaming and videos that you offer your fans. So it's definitely a lot of that. Also, a ton of meetings. Now I realize more than ever, it's like I'm having a meeting to have a meeting, and it's like sometimes you're in a meeting and like you just want to do the rule like Elon Musk has. Like if you didn't ask a question, it's like get up and leave, and like that wasn't important. But a lot of meetings about the future, what we're going to do on the game side. We just finished building our new HQ. Hey neighbor. So that took up quite a bit of time. We've been doing that for 4 months now, and then really it's kind of the entertainment side of our name as well. Like we're looking at things outside of just general team ownership in gaming, and expanding upon that. So just putting a lot of irons in the fire to kind of like diversify what we're doing, to kind of differentiate what we're doing versus what Arnold and his team is doing, and make us attractive to potential investors down the line.
And I sort of want to continue down the business path just for 1 second, because Arnold, you worked for Google, and Joe, Comcast, right? These are two massive companies. I don't think anyone could debate that. Why move into esports? And do you think that esports is sort of like the worthwhile investment? Is this more of a passion project for you guys? Like, is this where you see new money coming in? Like, what's sort of like the reasoning, and what do you think the projection is for esports in the future? I know it's a big question, but whatever you guys can say. Maybe Arnold first.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that we were able to see actually working in tech and working in startups is, I really look for, I guess, more about, there's like two things, right? In terms of kind of how I make personal decisions in terms of my career, and probably the advice I would give is that, like, you gotta really look for three things, right? One, you gotta have a passion for it, and clearly I think both of us, both Joe and I, have a passion for this stuff. You gotta make sure that that you gotta be good at it, right? So the skill set you have needs to apply and needs to be relevant for whatever it is that you want to do. So for instance, I love basketball, wanted to be in the NBA, couldn't make the varsity team because I sucked. I'm never, like I love it, but if you suck at it, sorry, but you should figure out something else, right? It's like the same as if I wanted to be a pro player. It's not going to work. And the third thing I think that is most important is like kind of what I think about is like there needs to be a market need for it. Like there needs to be product market fit. So if I use that prism, or I use that filter to understand like how important this is, and I think the esports industry is at a really critical turning point that has just accelerated because of everything going on, obviously with COVID-19. But what all COVID-19 really did in terms of the esports industry, besides the tons of changes that are happening, is it accelerated the underlying currents and trends that were already in place. So what I mean by that, if you look at baseball, the average age of a baseball fan is 57, 58 years old. You look at the NBA, it's not that much better, right? That's supposed to be the hot young league. The average age is like 50 years old, right? So the trends were already underway. I think esports is on the rise. And for me, being able to get into an industry that is growing so quickly, that I had a real passion for, and most importantly, I felt, especially in trying to run a global esports organization, I feel like we're only in the first inning of stuff we could do, right? Like I think the sponsorships are boring. I think a lot of the content stuff we're doing is boring. Like I think a lot of where we are could be so much better. And I felt that it was better for me to go into an industry that I had a passion for, that was growing as quickly as it was, where I felt I could come in and like actually add value, versus me joining Tesla. I don't know if I can add that much value to Elon, versus in esports. I think there's a lot of things I could take from the startup world, from the tech world, or even from the business world, and try to move the industry forward, try to make it a better ecosystem, and try to make this bigger.
And Joe?
Yeah. I mean, so why Comcast got into esports, because for them it was an opportunity to reach a younger audience that necessarily they weren't reaching at the time. And esports, you're talking about like the 12 to 35 range, which is a consumer that may not be watching cable TV anymore, but they're definitely ISP users, mobile users, and that's something that's in Comcast portfolio. Also consumers of content. So now we have our Peacock, which is our answer to Netflix. But it was also a way for us to go into a space organically and authentically, especially as a traditional sports owner. It was doing the Philadelphia Flyers of the NHL, but go into a space and build an identity and a brand, and not try to be like, hey, we're corporate, we're here. And we try to do the opposite of that. We try to be nimble. We try to be a very startup feel. And then, so that it worked out well. And obviously we jumped over to T1 and it's going pretty well so far. For me, obviously, super passionate about gaming. It's fun. It's a fun industry. No day is the same, but also you run into different personalities, and everyone slices the apple a little bit different, right? Everyone's carving out what they're doing. Some people are esports orgs that do great at merchandise. Some people are content houses that have teams. Some are traditional esports powerhouses. And then some people want to be everything to everybody. And that's a cool way. You can kind of see where that's going. And there's a lot of brands that definitely resonate. There's only a handful that would say they resonate globally. And like Arnold was saying, it's hard to be a global brand. Like you can't just say like, I have Korea on lockdown or I have NA on lockdown. You have to figure out how to resonate with the different markets. So not everyone in those markets wants the same kind of stuff, like the same content or the same, streaming highlights, or, you only subtitle in English or Korean or Chinese. Like you have to figure out what's best there. And, for me, like Arnold said, moving things forward and changing things. Like if I could change one thing about LCK and the way we operate now is the way we scrim. I hate it. I think those long 6-hour blocks or whatever it is, like, is not good for the players. It doesn't necessarily going to make you a better player. And it keeps our players up till 4 a.m. because they're streaming afterwards and they're relaxing. And, Arnold and I can't, like, if we both agree, and Arnold, I don't know if you do or not, but if we both agree that like, hey, that's not the way to do it, we need 8 other teams to say, okay, yeah, we agree, let's change it. But until that happens, we're kind of stuck with that. And, player health, mental health is a huge issue. It's going to be a bigger issue as the pressures keep mounting, on a global scale, because, 10 years ago, there wasn't social media where like you have one bad match and you're getting instantaneous feedback from everybody. And that can take a toll. I mean, no one wants to go into the comments and read, but like it's natural instinct to go see what people are saying. And, you have to figure out a way to combat that. You have to figure out a way to train better. And that's why part of our Nike partnership is the large part of it is built around training and athletics. It's not about, wearing cool gear, which is awesome. It's about making the boys physically fit so they can, prolong their careers. So they're not peaking at 21, 22, like get them to 30. Like that's a win. Like they're breadwinners for their families. They give them a lifestyle to earn. Like you saw us bring back Wolf after he retired, and he spoke pretty candidly on social media about his struggles. And now he's having fun being a content creator. Not everyone's a content creator. So you have to provide avenues. And that's a big area I think we should, figure out pretty quickly.
Because I wanted to go into the franchising discussion. We recently sort of found out a whole lot of the names. I was very impressed to see that like all of the challenger teams put in a bid, all of the LCK teams put in a bid. So at least nationally, we're nailing it. But getting all of this this outside influence is something that I wanted to specifically speak to you two about, because you have been massive advocates for the global side of everything. I think that you guys have been fighting an uphill battle for us on the global side of the broadcast as well, like trying to make the LCK more international. Do you think bringing in outside names that we did see, do you think that is going to be good for the scene, or do you think that we should stick, at least for the beginning of franchising, stick to the Korean names that we have already? What's your view on this one? I guess we'll start with you, Joe, if you're still there.
Yeah, no, I'm still here. I think that, teams in the LCK currently should get a fair shake. But also you have to look how we're going to, become a bigger league and make ourselves more enticing for more investment, more partnerships. Because if you're going to a franchise model, that means there's revenue sharing for the teams to be had. And, for as a team that hopefully gets into the league, you need a big pot. We have rising expenses. Player salaries aren't cheap, especially if you're going to, after last last fall when the Hoonie Gate skyrocketed salaries.
The Hoonie
So like,
Gate.
I think everyone should get a fair shake, but I think it's a good thing if there's opportunity for new blood to come in, but it has to be the right new blood, and it can't just be a checkbook, and it can't just be someone with a big brand. It has to be the right partner for the league who's going to look out for the league. And look, and Arnold will probably back me up with this one, but if it's not 10 teams and we can't find 10 rock solid teams that can push the LCK forward, let's go with 8 and then find 2 more later down the road. We don't have to go with 10 right away.
Do you echo that, Arnold? What's your take on all of the teams that have applied?
I think it's so critically important that you find the right teams. And it's not just how much capital they have. It's also like how committed they are, but also how strategic they can be. So it doesn't matter if somebody outside comes in with a ton of cash and their motives are not to grow the league, right? Like, oftentimes me and Joe will be competing on the field and at the same time, we're also trying to grow the league. And we understand that sometimes you have to sacrifice your team's interest for the betterment of the league. You have to, you have to do interviews after the game, even though it's stressful, because that's what makes a league better. And the only things that can, do that is you have to have people that are aligned with those interests. And it's a lot harder. I think we've shown this to be true. It's a lot harder and a lot messier to cut teams out than it is to bring teams in, right? And I think we've seen that, with some examples like Echo Fox and some of the other stuff that happened there, right? And those risks are very real in the Korean scene, both domestically and internationally. And if we bring in the wrong teams, it is going to be 10 times worse when they have to be cut out, right? Yeah. And so for me, I think the quality matters a lot more. I'm completely open. I actually think if we can't get to 10 awesome teams, get 8 awesome teams, right? Like, I know there's some issues with like how the season structure would be and all of these things, but it's one of those things where, the downside is just unimaginable, because like if you told me about what's going on, what happened with some of these other teams in, let's say, an LCS or whatever, and they're happening, I couldn't even imagine those scenarios 5 years ago, right? Right. So I think the downside is just not worth it, especially when we have such momentum building into this thing where League of Legends could be recognized on par or even greater than some traditional sports, especially when it comes to global exposure and global presence.
Yeah, and I think another big thing too, like you were saying, Arnold, is, and people might not like to hear this, when you and I, our teams compete, right? We will compete at checkers, we will compete at, League of Legends, video game, whatever it is, we'll compete. But often, when we're not competing against each other, you need business partners, as teams. Like, yeah, we're competitive, but when we're working on business side, Arnold and I are always looking for what's best for the league, not just what's best for T1 or what's best for Gen.g. So we definitely talk to each other a lot, especially on big topics like, how to push the league forward, or what's the right model, or how can we do something different to be more progressive or get us to where we need to go. Because right now, we're only on, C, and we try to get to Z, and you need, 8 or 10 partners to go in the direction. And if you have a handful of us that want to do one thing, and then you have a couple rogue agents that just want to be on their own or are using LCK to springboard to get merchandise into China, that's not going to help LCK in Korea. As we are a Korean league, as much as I'm from America and whatever, like, Korea is super important for me, my team, and you have to find a way to put Korea first and our initiatives here, and not use this as a springboard for something else, because the LCK shouldn't be a springboard for anything. This is like the place to be. This is one of the best leagues in the world, where the best talent comes out of, and it should be operated that way. That's why fighting with Kespa about getting the English cast was so important in the winter, because little things like that. My pleasure. But like little things like that go a long way for the scene. There's a lot of Western fans that crave LCK, and if you're taking that away, why? Like, why are you taking that away? So there's little fights like that people don't see a lot, like especially that happen like not on social media, like when we're doing stuff behind the scenes that are really important to push things forward. And if it doesn't work, just tweet about it.
True.
Don't worry, we've noticed, Joe. We've certainly noticed that's part of the approach. You mentioned something that I do want to go into a little bit further. It's the fact that the LCK is important in unto itself. What do you think makes the LCK so attractive? Is it the fact that we don't import talent unless it's a coach from Europe, I guess, and your sandbox, which is a very new thing. We do import analysts and things like that from overseas, but we are just very Korean. Do you think the nationalism is what's attractive about the LCK? What makes the LCK the region that you guys want to be representing?
So for us, even when we first got in, we looked at every single market, and we thought the LCK was the best market. And the reason being was we saw really the most passionate fan base. At the same time, we saw business operations that weren't done properly. So we thought there was a lot of potential upside there, to be very frank with you guys. As well as we saw a league that had the opportunity to really compete and be the counterbalance to the LPL and be the most global league out there. And we are the most global league out there. So what we see is through just the immense amount of talent that exists within LCK. And I actually believe the future model is one where you'll actually see more imports come into the LCK. As well as a really global fan base where people are watching all across Southeast Asia, people are watching in China, people are watching in North America, Australia, and Europe as well. And the fact that nobody's really focused on growing that potential, to us, was the most exciting part, right? And we actually wanted franchising to happen sooner because we felt that our potential was a little bit withering away. So a lot of the stuff that we talked to, even Ryan about was, when I was watching, LCK long time ago, or even StarCraft, right? I thought it was kind of cool to watch the Korean leagues. It was like the insider. You knew that they did the coolest stuff, the wackiest stuff, the randomest stuff. Now I watch our broadcast, and I think it's the most boring broadcast out of all of the regions. I understand why. It's not your guys' fault. It's more teams say no to like every single content ask. I get it. And this is where I think, the league needs to step in and say, here's the requirements. You got to do this. You got to do this. You got to do this. And I want us to try more things that are riskier, that sometimes fans may not like and some fans will love. But what we became was, let's play it safe league, right? The no fun league is what we became, right? And so for us, we see an opportunity where despite us being a little bit of the no fun league, we actually ended up with the most global, most exciting league globally out there. So it's just a matter of what do we need to do? What teams do we need to bring into the tent so that we can take this to the next step, right? Because ultimately, the only way we can stay competitive is not to create some crazy restrictions around salary. Like, we got to compete head to head with LCS salaries. We got to compete head to head with LPL salaries. That's just how the world works. And the only way to do that is to grow the overall scene.
Yeah, Joe, what do you think?
I mean, we never wanted to go into any other league but the LCK. It's a bit of a sleeping giant, like Arnold said, like on the business operations side. When I came in to the team, what I didn't want to do, and I made sure, like I tried to do as best I could, was to not make it, a Western team. Like, I just wanted to amplify the things that they already do amazing in Korea, and add a little bit of things. It's like making a recipe, like add a couple little dashes here and there of things that I think would do well. And I think one that I think I'll pat myself on the back is content. I think bringing in an in-house content team and churning out content for the fans, I think was the right and smart decision. I think it took the players a minute and the coaches a minute to like get accustomed with the cameras being there. And I think once we proved to them that we were never going to put them in an embarrassing situation, we were never going to leak strats, we were never going to show things on the whiteboard. Like, and this is going back to when Como was here. Like, we never did anything to hurt them professionally or give anything away. And I mean, the best thing, the moment when we were at Worlds and we lost, we
no Discord call leaks.
No, fortunately, my wife's not big into League of Legends.
Oh God, you guys.
But like after we lost at Worlds, like we put the cameras down when they came back, like into the room, because we knew it wasn't time to film content. We knew it was time for, because, you know, it was, you know, we kind of knew like the writing was on the wall a little bit in terms of that roster, and let them have their moment to soak in. And I think that earned a little bit of trust. And by the way, Arnold, when have we ever been able to say no to LCK content? I have to say yes to everything.
I'm pretty sure we say yes to everything.
I mean, I wish they wouldn't do a video where, you know, they make you go to a green screen and touch on a player that's no longer on your roster, but and have them wink at you. But what do I know?
Joe brings up a really good point here. Like to me, the content stuff, the business stuff, right? Like, look, my personality is one where I want to win, right? Like, I know we don't always win, and we, you know, most recently lost. But to be honest, like, I want to compete on content, right? I want to compete on business deals, right? Like, I want to compete in the game. Like, that's how we're built. That's who we hire. Like, and that to me was disappointing when, you know, we first got into LCK and met some other teams, and they don't want to compete on content, right? It's like, no, like, this is part of how you're building a successful org. Because if you're not getting a big sponsorship deal, if you're not competing on content and growing a fan base, long term, you're not going to be able to afford the top player, right? So for me, it's part of the competition, right? And I agree with Joe. Like, it took us a while, right, to really build that trust with the players, to really show that we have their best interests at heart, that we're trying to take care of them, that we're, you know, pushing this thing forward. But I think it's been really helpful. For instance, one thing that we noticed was that when T1 came into the scene, they started doing some content. All of a sudden, we weren't the only like lone wolf forcing content, right?
Two wolves in your pack.
Then all of a sudden, I just recently noticed that DRX is doing a ton of content, right? Like, you just start seeing where the league is going to end up and what kind of competition we're going to start driving across the board, right? And the most important thing is when you have this kind of competition, you need to have people that you trust on the other end to compete fairly against each other, instead of ones that can become bad actors or, you know, go into some crazy scandal or something like that, right? Because like, that's the last thing you want, right? I'm not gonna answer. Don't try to trap me, all right? So
be still, relax, be still.
So I think that's the big thing. It's like, I view this as part of the competition. I view the competition on the field as sacred, but at the same time, on the business side, I want to hire business people that want to compete against the T1s and, you know, the Comcast, you know, SKT money that they have. Like, I want to go in and I want people that want to fight for that, right? Like, that's how we want to build the league. It's really strong competitive drive across the board.
Hey, you have that $45 million war chest you raised last quarter, so you got more money than we have. I think too, like, you have to be willing to play nice with your competition. Like, Arnold and I we agreed to let Wolf and his guys shoot some content together at Gen.g's office. Like, just little things like that go a long way to collaborate, because that helps everybody, right? It's like, we're not, you know, not every fan of T1 is a fan of Gen.g. Same thing with reverse. Right. But you can lift each other up. You don't have to step on each other every single time. Like, Arnold and I, we joke back and forth and we banter and whatever. And like, I'll meme him, and I know he's got like memes like in a drawer somewhere, waiting for that one day that he maybe gets to use them. And like, I can't look, and I know like I'll get it one day. Like, it's gonna happen. Like, the fact that we posted that photo of Faker holding a whiteboard, like, that was a great idea. I'm super excited for those ones. But, you know, you have to be able to compete, because like, the problem is, like, a lot of the teams for the longest time accepted partnership deals and sponsorship deals less than market value and killed the market for everybody else. So like, if you go to a peripheral company or another company and say, oh, I'll just take trade, and then like someone else is coming in and saying, no, we do cash deals. And it's like, well, these 6 teams say they'll do it for free, and now you want to pay. It's like, it kills the market. Like, you have to know your value. And as an LCK owner, you have one of the 10 most valuable assets in the world.
Yeah.
And you have to treat it like that. On the business side, on the team side, like, I'm not saying you have to pay your players, you know, $10 million each, but you have to be competitive. You have to compete. And sometimes with players, it's not about the money. It's about where they feel comfortable, and, you know, or facilities, or just little things like that. But our goal is to not make our talent in their prime go to the LCS or LPL. And I hope, like, honestly, in the next 3 years that you see a European player come over here, in prime European player.
I want to bring the conversation towards a little bit more of the League of Legends. And I know we've gone into it a little bit here, but we've had discussions about sort of the league meta at the moment, especially in the LCK, with how things have. We brought up coaching just a little bit, but we've been discussing sort of like a stagnation of the League of Legends meta. Arnold, you mentioned this, saying that like you want things to get a little bit more exciting. Like Korea used to be the place that you watched for innovation, not necessarily just the player called innovation, but also like actual innovation. And it hasn't become that because we're playing it safe more often. Have you guys sort of noticed that? And do you think that it's based on the pressures on our players, or do you think this is based on League of Legends at the moment with how the game mechanically stands? Like, what are your sort of thoughts? And LS, maybe you could fill them in a little bit more about this stagnation idea before we go into it.
I guess one of the things I talked about this before on I think I talked about it before on stream, but I think I talked about it in one of the talk shows. I don't know which one off the top of my head. One of the things that struck me as very bizarre inside of Korean orgs, I talked to a trainee member of one of the LCK teams. I'm not going to say which one. And we had a lengthy conversation about like the support meta and about champion picks. And one of the things that I do is I frequently have pro players go on my stream, talk about things, and have like roundtable discussions, yada, yada, yada. We went down the list for like 30 minutes on how support champions, like the meta months ago, right? I was very adamant that it was bad, or that the champions were bad, etc. And I basically said that this doesn't make sense. And I talked to the player for an extended period of time. He agreed with me on everything, and then said that it doesn't matter because the coach just won't let us deviate. And it's like, what the hell? What is going on? And I feel like that's a really, really big problem, because the more that I've talked to even some of the players, they either have these really weird ideas that stem, I think, back from StarCraft, where it's just like, if you're not better than another player, you can't look for other answers. But then also, I think the top-downness in terms of hierarchy prevents deviation and growth. Yeah, so maybe that. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more I could say, but I shouldn't in a talk show. So, like, you know, this is where we're at.
Yeah, I think you know, it's one of those things that is kind of a state that we agree with. Is that there's a lot of teams, ourselves included, that often play, you know, too passively, or there's this idea that a lot of these teams are too afraid to take risks at any given state, and it makes. I think it also is one where I think it would be helpful to see that. You know, I think a lot of it is that I think the fans also need to see why certain choices are being made, and why, and when, and why. I think that's really needed. I think there's also, but I do think the one thing that we've seen and that we've noticed is that the coaching staff gets it, right? So, you know, the number one thing that we've noticed is that the orgs that are able to transition to a more successful team, and that are able to adapt a little bit better, we're always the ones that are now a little bit more flatter in terms of, and this is kind of how we've structured our new coaching org as well, a little bit more flatter, where, you know, the players and the coaches have much more of a dialogue, and the coaches are really facilitators with the players, because oftentimes the players will understand and know the meta better than any of the coaches, right? Unless you have some exceptional, like, I'm Jordan and I'm also going to be but coaching instead kind of thing. But like, that's, I think, a transition that is happening. But if you think about it, the way the system was set up with relegation, right? As a team that has, it makes sense if you're the second place team that you don't want to do like some crazy strategy that'll plummet you off the cliff into 8th place, right? But if you're an 8th place team, the 6th place team, a 5th place team, right? You're often more scared that if you screw it up, you're going to go into relegation and you're done.
Yeah.
Right. So you almost have this, to me, I think less about like, oh, Koreans are like this or Koreans are like that. Because I'm like, no, just think about logically, like, why this state has come to be. and like what are the incentives encouraging that state to continue to exist, right? And if you look at that state, which is if you're a 5th place team, if you take a bunch of risks, you could be out of LCK, right? Then you're not going to take those risks. You'd rather be a 5th place team or a 6th place team than take a risk and at best be a 3rd place team, but or at worst be out of LCK. So all the results of the way the league is structured create binary outcomes, and binary outcomes don't promote risk taking, especially if you're anywhere close to mid. If you're never going to hit that, the 1 mark.
Yeah, it's definitely a risk reward scenario. Like in LEC, your franchise, you have no risk. Like if you want to try something crazy, you can. And in LCK, 1, like relegation is always a big risk, but 2, map differential as the tiebreaker. You could have the exact same record, and all of a sudden, you fall 4 spots like we did this year. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to play conservative. I'm not going to go for the highlight play. I'm going to just pack it in. And also, too, like if we're playing, so say T1 wants to play like a European team. We're playing like a team that's super aggressive. We're doing this, but the other team is playing like a traditional LCK team. It's like you're trying to dance with someone who's like dancing to a completely different song. Yeah. And it's impossible to engage them. They don't want to. It's going to look like clunky, and then it looks like your risk is not going to pay off anyway. But at the same time, I don't like. I think the misconception that we play slow. You look at like our match times. Like everyone's LCK is so slow, but like it's not, right? Like it's pretty on par with LEC in terms of length of matches. Yeah. So. But it's risk reward. Like we're not going to go take a huge risk to fall 5 spots, and But also too, like,
and also look at the playoff structure, right? Oh, this playoff structure is insane. Like the best team, you get to see them once, right? Like or whatever it is, right? Like
no, I saw us twice.
Yeah, you go straight.
That structure does like the entire structure encourages you to not take risk. Right. Yeah. And so for me, I get really upset when people are like, oh, these Koreans, they just don't take it. I'm like, dude, 1, that's kind of racist. 2, it's also like, well, why do you think that is? Let's actually go a little bit further instead of just being a Redditor who only looks at the surface level. Really think thoughtfully about why those outcomes happen, what systematically creates these kind of outcomes on a consistent pattern-based level. And then you start realizing, well, the playoff structure completely over rewards being a top team and map differential, right? The relegation system that means that if you're a 6th place team, you're more worried about being relegated than you are about anything else. And then you say, okay, if that's true, if this hypothesis is true, that means that challengers level teams will be taking more risks, because if you take these big risks, you can beat the 8th place team, right? Or the 10th place team, right? And they do, right? They're the ones doing the wacky things, like our boy Rich. He's now in the LCK, right? Like, that's a big risk, but it paid off, right? Like, there's a problem with the system. Once you fix the system, then you can begin to fix the culture.
Sure. I've got another question as well. Like, what do you think about a collegiate league in Korea? Why isn't that already happening?
That's
like,
a good
should that be the next thing that we should be doing?
All the top players are leaving school at 8th grade to go to academy rosters and go pro. So. Yeah, I think unless that dynamic changes, you would never see it. Like you see in collegiate leagues in the U.S. and scholarships being offered, but a lot of those, either former pros are going back to school, or people that are just below the cusp of actually making those rosters. But I would love a university. I mean, I bet you a ton of university students in Korea play League.
Oh yeah,
they do. Yeah,
and they're probably pretty damn good. So. We should do something like that.
So this makes me think of a question though. So there was a story that I tweeted about last year, I think 2019. There was a player that tested for one of the LCK teams, and apparently he passed with flying colors. But then because of his age and the fact that he was in university, he was denied the ability to join. But
by the team
by the team, yeah. They said you're too old. And this is something that I've tweeted about several times because I act as like I don't know what you want to call it. I let players live with me, Korean players, foreign players, whatever, at my apartment. And I've had Korean players that were living with me that are 20 years old, Western age, and they've been added by teams, and the coach or whoever it is that's in charge of like asking will say, how old are you? And they'll say 20, and they're like, oh, okay, you're too old. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, what? So I think if a collegiate team's going to have to flourish or something like that, this like stigma against age has to sort of end, because I almost got into it with one of the coaches being like, you're in a titled position that has technically no qualifications. Like, why are you telling someone that's 20 that is higher than some of your main players on the ladder that they're too old? It doesn't resonate. It doesn't make sense in my head, because we can list so many players from other games that are either older or players that debuted at an older age that are like perfectly fine. And I would imagine that collegiate faces probably a similar problem. So not only just the college, but also military, and then the age stigma.
Yeah, I don't understand like why someone would say like, you're too old at 20. I understand like why, like, hey, we want an academy player to be 16 and grind it out and be a rookie at 18 or whatever. But like if you can play, like there's a lot of examples in traditional sports where someone's a late bloomer and they come up and they're 28 or 30. There's no age limit. Like that's part of why physically training players, like their age shouldn't be the factor of why they're picked or not picked. Like, can you play? Are you good? If mechanically are you sound? But more importantly, are you big brain? Do you understand how to like maneuver what the team's trying to do? That's more important than like I'm 20 or I'm 22 or 4. Faker's 24. Are you gonna throw him off the team because he's 24? Like, he's gonna put him in their house. Like, you know what I mean? Like we had even older players than Faker was last year. Like age is nothing. I think that's a short-sighted way, and that's an easy out is to say no to somebody.
Yeah.
Versus like taking them on and like letting them prove themselves, because like I guarantee, that's just a cop out in my opinion.
I look, if you can play, you can play, and I think the big thing is, age is basically a shortcut because you don't have the right infrastructure and system in place to properly assess talent, right? Yeah. So if you're looking at 100 people as an individual without a system, yeah, sure, age helps because it enables you to filter out certain things, right? But if you have a system in place that accurately judges, talent level, then age is just one of the factors, right? That goes into the system rather than the shortcut answer, which is like an individual making that choice. And I think that's really goes back to my point is a lot of LCK was based around individual judgments of character or individual. I think this is because this is what I've seen versus, okay, we got to build a system and that'll enable us to, really compete for the long term. Right. And so for us, like, yeah, like we think that's crazy. I don't know if you guys knew, but like, of course you guys knew. I think you guys were casting it. Rich played and took a game off Griffin, right?
Dude, Rich was amazing.
Right? Yeah. And like people thought we were insane, right? Yeah. And we were saying like, well, we know he's gonna grind. He still can't see us very well. I love you, Rich, but you gotta work on that. But it's to be expected, right? Coming from HOTS, he's gotten way better because he's been grinding like crazy, right? But like, to me,
his Aatrox was like one of the best I've ever seen in the promotion tournament. Man. Like, holy crap, it was really good.
And like now he's in the LCK, right? And like we were able to give, like I said, you know what, give him a shot, right? Like the first answer is always nobody's gonna come from HOTS and go into League of Legends, right? And I was like,
right,
probably, you're probably right, but like let's give him a shot and see how he plays and put him in the system and see how he performs against others in that same system. And all of a sudden he's doing really well, right? So I think it's easier oftentimes if you're an individual to make that judgment because maybe you're right. Maybe your bias is right more often than not. But for individual exceptional cases, sometimes you can't use a broad-based bias to judge an individual, assessment, right?
Yeah, guys, I want to move the conversation just a little bit because we are pretty deep into this interview, and thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. But I understand it's very valuable. So I want to move to the mid-season cup and what you guys sort of expect for this particular tournament? Because we haven't seen a lot from Gen.g and T1 apart from, you know, checking out the streams and things like that. What are the confidence levels at, and what do you think we're going to need to work on moving into a match against the LPL? Because they're formidable, right? I don't think there's any two ways to slice it, and their top 4 teams are looking pretty intimidating. Maybe Joe, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they're formidable, but I think the LCK is formidable. I think our top 4 teams, you know, can compete with any top 4 team in the world. It's a bit of a crapshoot because we're playing best of 1. So, yeah, you could have a slow start and you know, be down 0-1 going in. So I don't personally like the format. I wish it would have been something a little bit more of a friendly, less this competitive. I appreciate there's a prize pool, but it's not going to give us the best measuring stick, especially with the ping and everything else. But
yeah,
I'm just glad we have competitive league, to be honest. Like, I think to fill this 2-month gap, it's way too long to go without competing. And, you know, for us, we're kind of damned if we do, damned if we don't. If we don't win the whole thing, it's going to be a stain on our LCK championship, especially if we lose to a Korean team. No offense to anybody else, but like, if we lose to a Korean team, it means our LCK win was a fluke or whatever. And if we don't beat the Chinese teams, we're never going to get back to Worlds and we're trash. So like, we're in a spot where we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. I just want to see growth and, you know, work on some things and, you know, get ready for summer, which, you know, is our qualification for Worlds. So as much as I want to win, look, I'm not saying I don't want to win. I'm just saying that the format doesn't lend itself to, you're not going to see the most aggressive gameplay. We just talked about this earlier. Like,
yeah,
the risk reward, like, I want to get out of groups, right? Like, you want to get out of that. You need to probably finish 2-1 at least to get out, with a couple 2-0s mixed in there in terms of, or 1-0s. But I don't know, man. Like, get out of groups and see how it goes. But I would love for all the Korean teams to come out victorious and come out in the top 4. That'd be fun.
I mean, that's the dream, isn't it? We'll just have like an LCK finals afterwards, just going to repeat, well, with a different format. Easy.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I mean, if there's a repeat finals again, that'd be funny.
I think Korea is probably just going to do really well. I felt the in terms of like watching all the regions, I was most disappointed and let down with LPL, because you can't be disappointed about NA if you never had any hope. But I was most disappointed about LPL because it felt like Europe looked actually better in the finals than, like, LPL's finals did not look very high quality. The game, I was live viewing it. And I mean, chat seemed to feel the same way. I mean, there also seemed to be people on Twitter that felt the same way. Like, the final was very lackluster for what one would have expected in terms of gameplay or game quality. Now, obviously, there's been a month since it's happened. But I would imagine that just going off of the last couple of weeks and watching everything, that Korea should have the edge in this mini tournament.
Do you think the LPL's break hurt them in terms of quality of gameplay in the spring split? I think it did.
I would imagine that it would, yeah.
Yeah. Because you look at like the chaos at the top of the bracket, right? Where it was like you're kind of constantly punching each other in the head, and, you know, it was just a weird kind of flow to the season. Versus LCK LEC had a mini break and then got back to it, and I don't think we missed the beat. I think the top teams were the top teams going into it. Like, I think the top 4 teams in the LCK last spring, at the start of the split, you would have said that was probably the top 4 teams in whatever order you're going to put them in, but it would have been those 4. But right. I think, yeah, the LPL, I was surprised with some of the landing spots.
Yeah, LPL certainly, it felt like the top 5 were far more condensed, in my opinion. I felt like here in the LCK, we had a top 3 that looked very dominant, and then you had Damwon and KT, and then somewhere off the cliff, you've got the other teams, right? That's what it sort of felt like at the top of the LCK. I think the LPL, because of their just scrappy style in general and how they take their league, like, I think it was a lot of teams were able to beat other teams, but their finals were insane. Like the fact that you have a final without the top qualifying team in there, and like all of the teams at the top were like so extraordinarily close, and it felt like there wasn't sort of that one team, you know, and FPX finishing so low and still being the same squad, right? Like, I think it's certainly a lot of chaos that the tried and true LCK strategy is going to be put to the test against some of these certainly more gung-ho type styles. I think that LS is right. I believe in especially you guys, but I think DRX are also an exciting team to look out for. I think the more time that goes by, the more dangerous that squad's going to be, because I think the more relaxed Pioshik is and the better he plays, the sky is going to be the limit for that team. And I think Damwon are always interesting, because who knows what they're going to do. I think Ghost is an upgrade. So, you know, they were already internationally good at Worlds last year, so it looks like things are going to get better. Arnold, what do you think? How are you feeling gen.g's sort of chances are to find some redemption here? Because, you know, after the LCK final, I imagine you guys are pretty hungry.
Yeah. Look, we had obviously over the off season, or not the off season, but you know, in between splits, you know, we've had some big changes, right? You know, including, you know, Edgar and us kind of mutually deciding to split, and for him to take a break. But I actually think, you know, a lot of it is more a test on ourselves, for us to come together, to work on the things that, you know, we already had in place. So, you know, throughout the course of really the first split, you know, Edgar was really preparing both Odin, who, you know, who will be kind of leading our coaching team there, as well as the staff, to kind of really take bigger roles, right? So one thing that Edgar was really strong about, really good about, is preparing his team, his coaching staff, as well as his players, to be ready to take bigger roles, right? And this is kind of our really first opportunity, or not our first opportunity, but another opportunity for us, for the players to take bigger roles on the strategy, for the, you know, for Tom, for Trace, for Odin to take bigger roles now. So for us, we kind of view it as like block all the noise, especially given the format of this thing is really weird. You know, it's kind of it's cool and it's great. I'm so excited we're doing it. At the same time, we're like, I don't know what this, if it is we shouldn't view this as the measuring stick. We should view more about our input and what we do to be ready for it as a good measuring stick. As a good measuring stick for how we're going to prepare for the next split as well, and how we're going to prepare for Worlds if we do make it, right? Or when we do make it.
I really like that.
So
that
for
mindset's
me,
really, really cool. Adds sort of some extra value to what is a tournament that doesn't have Worlds implications and things like that.
And the money's good too.
yeah.
But no, that's kind of how we're taking it, right? Like, this is, for us, you know, we're focused more on kind of our internal side. We feel really confident where, you know, we have this new coaching structure, you know, with a team of coaches now, with Odin taking kind of the leadership role of the team, where it's a bit more of a flat structure. It and we have told every single player, this means all the players have to step up, and be more active in it as well. That means Tom, Trace have to be more active around the strategy, and that Odin has to facilitate a much more, you know, a new coaching structure, as well as a new, as well as prepare us to get ready for both the mid-season stuff and the second half. So for us, you know, it's kind of block out all the noise. If we do win, we think we can win. We feel we're really competitive. Our scrim results are still really rock solid. So we feel really good about it. At the same time, we know that this isn't it, right? Like, this isn't the thing. So,
yeah,
you know, at the end of the day, like, the prize money would be great. You can eat some great Korean beef, but
Yes.
the dream.
But it's really about, like, all right, let's use this as a good measuring stick for how we're preparing ourselves, rather than like this is a be all and end all. And even the Chinese teams I talked to, I think they're taking it the same way.
Yeah.
LS, I want to talk to you because Arnold sort of showing us that more flat structure of coaching sort of reminds me of exactly what you were talking about in a lot of our coaching discussions about how coaching should look, with strategic coaching being over here, and then you've got someone facilitating conversation. The players do have a big voice. Do you think that what Arnold was talking about is sort of like the ideal coaching structure for League of Legends? What are your thoughts?
I feel like, so this was the thing that I talked about with Hotshot GG, and then I had like the roundtable with Whippo and Dominate and them. Those videos made it on Reddit. I think that the there's a difference between types of coaches, and I think that a lot of people in League of Legends, especially when there's no behind the scenes access, there's no videos, there's no knowledge about what's going on, they have trouble discerning what is the differences between different staff members that are on top of teams. And I think that in most cases, strategical coaches are pretty absent in the sense that they're there to facilitate conversation between the players on a strategical level. They're not there to come in with outside the box thinking, or at least not in the history of LoL, right? We've had many conversations on that. I think having multiple people be present is ideal. And then there's even extra features which I think are lacking inside of teams, like therapists or psychologists or something, because stress levels and mental health is so important in esports because of burnout, because of stress, because of the way that teams manage feedback and the way that the tournaments are structured and how top heavy things are. I think that even those things are necessary and that teams don't currently have them.
I don't know if that's true, by the way, because we have sports psychologists on staff. We also have like personal
Well, I'm
trainers.
talking like all over the world, like globally.
But what I do agree with you on, I was actually in the process of agreeing with you, but
okay, go.
So, but one thing that was really interesting, I think, specific to Korea, and is like the focus on mental health. Well, one, even in the U.S., like I was born and raised in L.A., and like the focus on mental health, especially in sports in general, isn't really there. But then it's definitely not there in Korea, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've noticed that the uptake of even sports psychologists is like almost immediate when it comes to the North American players, because they're just so aware of it right now. Versus in Korea, they're like, are they gonna go report what I say? Are they, I'm like, no, this is like completely separate. Like, this person is paid on a separate payroll, and there's like, walls where I can't talk to them about like specific things. But still, like, there's the uptake has been a little bit slower versus like the personal trainers. Like, I think all of our guys get personal training now for fitness, which is good. So at least that helps a little bit, but like, I wish that would accelerate more. And I view that as more of a cultural gap that exists where it's not talked about enough, I think, especially in Korean culture. But which is something I think, all the esports teams should push more aggressively on.
Wait, when did we get to the part where we talk about the spring split finals? I would love to talk about that. I don't know how.
I mean, you can do it right now because I think we're ready to cut. Yeah, let's bring that one up. I did actually. I think maybe we should address the elephant in the room just before we sign out. I know. Yeah.
I mean,
Joe was on time for this particular podcast, by the way, guys. So we didn't have to document any bans or anything like that. But I know that it was certainly something that caused a bit of a ruckus on both sides of the rift, and maybe a new solution needs to be thought of. Did you have okay, the floor's yours, Joe. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, so look, obviously, I reacted pretty strongly, given. Mind you, I woke up at 2 a.m. and I get the message that we lost 2 bans before the game even started. So I'm like, what the hell happened? We mistranslated an email, right? Like we thought that we sent the 2 people that had to do the pregame interviews at 1:30, and we figured the rest of the guys could show up on time like they normally do for a match, which is 2 hours before. Apparently we were wrong. I mean, I even called Arnold. Like, I called you, right? Like, I was like, dude, what the hell? And I mean, it's not, even if Arnold wanted to deny like the bans, like he can't. It's a rule, and like we broke a rule. So yeah, we got the punishment. Now, granted, we should have been punished. I think we should have been fined monetarily. Like, I don't think you should change the competitive state of a championship. Like, so hopefully that rule changes. But like, fine me 10 grand, find me some money. Don't change the competitive nature of the team and the makeup for the, not just our players, but for the Gen G guys.
I think it's like, if you're gonna, the way I view it is like, we're just gonna change. We have to make, like, we gotta divide a clear line between like when an org, if there's a mistake on something, like punishing the org versus punishing the players, right? Like, there's different mistakes, right? And like, I think, in this case, we felt like, don't punish the game, like, go punish us for screwing it up, right? Like, it's, You know, like that's kind of the way I felt about it. Was just like, I wish we had a system that, you know, and make the fine bigger based on the punishment level that you need.
I think that there's a clear issue with this that maybe goes away when we move into franchising, right?
Yeah.
And it's to do with teams having different amounts of money in their coffers. So if you have like an arbitrary like financial number, then what stops the big massive amounts of money organizations from taking advantage of the little ones by being able to do whatever they want without any actual in-game implication? And I think that becomes very, very difficult. Like if, say, in the summer split, we have the same situation and it's APK versus one of you big orgs. If it's a financial thing, then it means so much more for one of the teams. And when there's that disparity, I think it becomes very, very difficult.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but look, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, we were late, but I guess at least we showed up. So.
Oh my God.
It's all right. Well, you guys peaked early. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Mm-hmm. I'm just kidding.
But LS, you actually we've had this discussion many times about these bans and things like that, and you know, I don't know what the better solution is right now. This is what's really difficult about a situation like this. But LS, you sort of had an opinion on who it even benefits, right? Like, you're taking 2 bans away from T1, but what does that realistically do for the game? And based on side selection and things like this that had been decided weeks in advance, like it maybe wasn't even bad for T1 to lose their bans. And instead, it adds a whole lot of extra pressure to Gen.g because they are now in a state of advantage when strategically, based on the side selection, maybe they're not at an advantage.
The thing, I think that this is always going to be case by case relative to meta. I remember, I didn't say it on broadcast, I think I might have said it on Twitter, that T1 was fortunate to be blue side when this happened. Just because blue side has had a lot more freedom over the last like few weeks of like how bans were going. Generally, blue side gets to just target things that maybe they don't like rather than something that's actually prevalent inside of the meta or something that might be really problematic. And then given that it's happening B1, B2, B3, if you go through all of the pick bans from the split, I mean, I was of the stance that it doesn't really harm them that much because it was blue side. Whereas red side in certain metas could be really gross. There's been metas where you must ban 3 champions, or you can't let any of them through. I think one of the most historic that people will remember is Camille LeBlanc, Rengar. That like holy trinity of you cannot let any of them through. And then there were other periods where certain champions were just not allowed to be played. And if you're on red team and lose 2 bans, things get really gross. I think on blue team, you can still sort of mitigate what's going on to an extent. And then,
I think the way I reacted the way I did, because I'm sitting here thinking like my mistake is going to cost my team a championship because, like I said, I can't read a clock, right? And a lot of people, I saw comments saying that like we did it on purpose, and like I would never like disrespect the game or, you know, our opponent like that. And, you know, to have something like you think like luckily, yeah, we won, but leading up to that, like I thought like my mistake was gonna hurt my guys who worked extra hard given our off season, like from November on, with everything we went through, to like have something like that happen like on our big day. I was like mortified that like, you know, I ruined something. And again, like I apologize, but like I do apologize to Gen.g and Arnold and the guys, because, you know, a top tier org shouldn't be, you know, screwing up rules like that, like little simple things that you should be doing like day in and day out. And, you know, it sucks that it happened. And, you know, I am sorry that, you know, it did happen. And like, maybe it affected the game, maybe it didn't. We don't know. Like we can never like predict that. But, you know, I always want to compete against Gen.g at their 100%. Like I want to compete against anyone at 100%. I don't want an excuse anywhere for myself or them. And, you know, who knows? But yeah, it sucks that it happened. I'm glad we got past it. It won't happen again for sure. I learned my lesson, and, you know, it sucks, but we'll move on.
Yeah, it's great to hear. I mean, getting rid of an asterisk on a final, I think that was a point that you made.
I should have said that. I know I shouldn't have said that though, because if Gen G won, they deserve to win, and to throw a temper tantrum and call it something an asterisk game was stupid. But my point was more of about the rule than the outcome, right? And it's just it was frustrating, just because it's you couldn't. There's nothing either of us could do. Like I said, Arnold couldn't even decline the ban, if he wanted to, and say he was allowed to. They should have gave him the right as an org to say we don't want to do that, right? Or we do want to, which is, but make that part of the punishment. Let the org decide. But
maybe you could just add that in, right? And say look, if you get the choice, and then that way maybe it mitigates some of the problems. But maybe also it means that no one
creates more problems then, right?
Bans.
So that's why you just got to do money bans, man. That's the only way, right?
Yeah, because then Arnold takes the ban.
Then the player's gonna be like, "What the hell? Why'd you, let that one through, but let this one through, right?" I'm just be I don't want to affect the game state either, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's a bummer, but the good guys came out on top. So.
Well, let's see whether they come out on top next week. Thank you so much, guys. I know that we've now continued even longer. But it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope that this isn't the last time that you're on the POG State, because it has just been such a joy to have two titans of the LCK join us. And I hope you guys are in the LCK for 2021 as well, now that franchising has come in. It's not official, guys. It's not like Gen.g and T1 get free passes. They've applied like everyone else.
I submitted my
highly likely that they're going to be here next year, but still,
we submitted our application already. So, LOI application's in. Just waiting for that in-person interview. Come on, staff.
Yeah, very excited. And also, Joe's coming back to Korea next week. So welcome to Korea for next week. Unfortunate that we're not able to actually have you on the show in person, but we probably wouldn't anyway, because still COVID-19 times and all that. Everyone make sure that you're washing your hands. But thank you again, guys. Thank you, LS, for asking the tough questions as well. And we will see you for the next episode coming up in a couple of weeks. Peace.